Okay? Republicanism is the first notion we're gonna start. Why republicanism? Because yesterday we entered the first part of our course. The first part of our course is about when did political thought emerged for the first time in the Western civilization. And this happened in ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, when they got rid from the domination of the Persians, of the Persian Empire, they got independence, they got freedom, and they fought for their freedom, and they established the first self-governed communities in which power was not in the hand of a, pharaoh, an emperor, a king, a monarch, a tyrant, but they tried to give power to the many, if not the many, to give power to the population, to give power to the people, and the people, the word people in ancient Greece is, say, demos. So they wanted to establish the government of the demos, which in Greece is democracy. People, government, democracy. So they wanted to build, this kind of government of the people. The government of the people, this means try to promote politics as a common thing, trying to promote the state. It didn't exist the state, but let's say the state, say that the state belongs not to the monarch, not to one person who embodies the state, but belongs to anybody. So this thing, the state, is a public thing. In Latin, thing, res publica. Public thing, res publica. This means the state, the political institutions don't belong to a single person, but belongs to anybody. So we start with this problem. We start from ancient Greece because they started to try to understand what is the best form of government. They started to get, questions about politics, the questions about what we call nowadays politics. So they started to ask these questions. This is why we start with the ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, the Western political thought was born, and it was born also what we call politics, because the word politics comes from polis. Polis was the city, the self-government city in which all the people made decisions together about their political community. So they treated this thing all together because they wanted to be a res publica, a public thing that belongs to anybody. So the main form of government in the ancient city-states, in ancient Greece, that was called polis, was democracy. What does it mean? It means that they, once per month, they gathered together in the assembly of the city, which is called the boule. They gather together and they make all kind of decisions. Okay? So, this assembly made decision. And the decisions were made through democracy, which is different from our democracy yet, because that was direct democracy. Direct democracy, that means that anybody who belonged to the political community can go there and had to express their idea directly, not through representatives. There was not election. Everybody could propose a law. Everybody could propose a law, and this law had to be discussed. Everybody. Is not important if you're rich, if you're poor, but everybody is not everybody, it's all the citizens. All the citizens. So this direct democracy was not a real democracy because actually the citizens were just 10% of the population. Like if we imagine ancient Athens was about 500,000 people, so it's a big city, like 3 times Messina. So many people, they had to gather together, but this was only 10% of this population that could participate because they were actual citizens. Why? Because women remained excluded from the assembly because they were considered not to be able to, understand the public thing, and only because they were considered to be in charge of the economy, oikos, economy in the sense of the private economy of the house. So, and this unfortunately we stand this way until the early 20th century, when finally, women could entirely access the rights to vote. But in ancient Greece, they were excluded from this direct democracy, so you already remove 50% of the population. Then you had the slaves who were excluded from being citizens. Then you had the minors, they still excluded. Kids cannot vote, cannot be elected. And those who were not citizens. So, the other concept we said yesterday is citizenship. Citizenship is a very important concept. Citizenship means it's a very important institution we still nowadays have. This means citizenship means to be member of a political community. It's membership into a political community. This political community nowadays is mostly the state, the nation state, because politics is organized through nation states nowadays. But at the time, this was the community, was the city, was an urban community. So being citizen means having the citizenship, meant being the member of the political community of your city-state. The most important was Athens. Okay, so citizenship is being a member. Why is it important? Because citizenship comes when you had this membership, you had also some rights. This gives you rights. This gives you rights. If you're a citizen, you have some rights. Like for example, the right to decide who is your representative, the right to vote, the right to vote and get voted and get elected. So these are the political rights, Then you have the civil rights. Civil rights, you have some civil rights that belongs to anybody, like the right to be equal in front of a court, the right to have a fair trial. This is equal for everybody. The other civil rights are different. Citizens have and non-citizens do not have. And social rights, like healthcare, education, and so on. So when you get this membership, so you can imagine, membership as a card of a club. When you get this card of this club, you got these rights. But historically comes also with duties. In ancient Greece, being a citizen of Athens came with as an honor, as a privilege. They felt it was an honor, they felt it was a privilege, and they felt that it came with strong duties. The first of these duty was the duty to go war, to protect your country in war, the duty to be a good soldier. This is why every citizen in ancient Greece had the right to bear arms, because they had the duty to be a good warrior, So this duty as a citizen duty stayed until 20 years ago in Italy, for example. He stated along the 20th century, you know, in the early 20th century, you had millions of young European citizens killed because they had to go war, because military service was a compulsory duty. For 1 year, every citizen had to serve in the army. He came with this duty, and then you had to be ready to give your life. So strong duty. Another duty of citizenship is the duty to pay taxes to support, you know, state, fund the police, the school, the hospitals, and so on. This, in ancient Greece, this idea of the duties came strong with the idea of citizenship. Because, you know, if you were a citizen, you of Athens, if you belong to that 10% of the population who had the right to go to the assembly, you must feel this honor, you must, you know, honor this privilege by performing your duties. The duty was, first of all, to go to the assembly and to participate in the assembly. And to participate in the assembly, it was not that if you were not going to the assembly, you were considered a bad citizen. So you have, you know, to be active, to participate. And, you know, sometimes in some city-states the government got elected, the judges got elected, but in some other city-states there was a lottery. So any citizen could become a member of the government, so you must be informed. So citizenship came with this strong duty of participation. And this is the Republican idea. The Republican idea, republicanism, means it's an idea which considers that participation is the crucial point. We will see that, for example, liberalism thinks that freedom and individual rights is crucial. Democracy or socialism thinks that equality is the crucial point. Republicanism supports that, you know, participation is the crucial point. The more you participate, the more you are active, the best the state works, and the more rights you must have. So, yeah, let's say this republic was an ideal in ancient Greece, and this ideal was based on the idea of participation and on the idea of virtue. Means that you had to be a good citizen. What does it mean to be a good citizen? That you have to participate, and you have to participate in the public interest of the community, not in your own private interest. So we understand that polis, as the origin of politics, republic, citizenship, and virtue, that were the crucial values of the ancient civilization. And to understand what virtue means, we had considered the story of the first political philosopher in the history of Western civilization, which was Socrates. Socrates, who, you know, wanted to promote the Socratic method, idea, I don't know, so that promoting critical thinking, promoting, you know, the fact that the youth had to question the thing and to make progress. So he was, you know, try to understand, try to help the youth to also think about human affairs, think about society, make step forward in society. But then, as you know, his political thought is reflected on his trial, because he got trial because they said you're corrupting the youth and you're committing the felony of impiety, because we knew that in ancient Greece there was no division between politics and religion. They were merged, and everyone had also the duty to comply with the religion, with the gods. So it was accused of corrupting the youth and of impiety. And then he was offered You know, they said, yeah, you're guilty, but you can go exile. You can go exile. Or you can go to the public square and plead mercy and say, yeah, I was wrong, I was guilty. Yeah. Or our decision is that you are condemned to death. You have to drink the hamlet, you have to drink a poison, cicuta, and you have to die. But if you don't want, you can go exile, or you can go to the public square and say, I was wrong. And then Socrates say this famous discourse, the apology of Socrates, in front of this, tribunal of 501 Athenian citizens, and they say, I think I'm not guilty, but I respect the law of the state, so I prefer to die in order to show my virtue as a citizen. I prefer to die because I think that a good citizen has to respect the law of his political community, even when he thinks that these laws are wrong. Because social order is guaranteed by this political obligation that every citizen has towards, towards the republic. Socrates thinks, to be a good citizen means that you participate to create the law, to create the rules of your city. But then you have to comply with these rules that you participate to create. You have to obey to them, even when you think they're unjust, because they serve to preserve the social order of the political community. This is the political obligation. This means that citizens feel the obligation to comply with the laws in order to maintain the republic, in order to maintain the state, in order to preserve social order. Okay? So, virtue. So, through the history of Socrates, through his trial, you understand what the idea of virtue means. The idea of virtue means that when it comes to the public sphere, you put, the common good above your private interest. This is a very important principle of politics, because a good ruler is a ruler who rules in the common interest. A bad ruler, a bad politician, is the politician who does the politician for his own private interest. We know that in current political regimes, with politics has this problem, because it gives you privileged positions, and people use this privileged position to do their own private interest, which we call corruption, But in the ancient Greece, they promoted this idea of the republic, which was based on everybody has to participate in politics and has to participate through virtue, virtuously. And so this is the point. Like in Italy, we had this very big scandal of corruption in the 90s, right, Kimberly? You remember this big scandal? How was it called? Yeah, not sure. Never heard about Tangentopoli, Manipulite. Yeah. So in 1992, all the Italian system got crashed because all the parties that were in the government for 40 years, they discovered that they were taking money. The only party at the government who was not taking money was called the Republican Party, because this party was based on the Republican ideas. So, what did Socrates write? What is his main book? Not the notebooks, because as we said, he was going out and he was talking. So we know of Socrates through his main student, Plato. So Plato wrote a lot about Socrates, and he wrote the Apology of Socrates, which which is, the discourses that Socrates held during his trials in 399 before Christ era. Okay? So, let's go to Plato. Plato, he wrote this book, The Republic. The Republic. So he wrote this book, The Republic. The Republic. And so you keep understanding that the Republic is the most important concept in ancient political theory. Okay? The Republic, what was the Republic? He tried to describe how the ideal city could work. So, he said how society should be organized. So, through here, we're going to understand a very important difference in the history of political thought in political theory, which is the difference between idealism and realism. So Plato is the founding father of idealism, because he wrote this book and he said politics should be this way. The perfect city, the ideal city should be this way, idealism. I have an idea and I want to make it real. So, what did this say? Society should be governed by the most wise people. Philosophers should be king. Philosopher king. So because the philosopher, they have the knowledge, their virtues, so they should govern society. Why? Why? So here we have, this is a philosophical explanation of this issue. Why society should be governed by the philosopher? Because Plato is an idealist. What does it mean is an idealist? He thinks that you have these forms, eternal forms, okay? So, Plato believes we have, this world where we live, table, chair, and so on. But this table, this chair, this table is just an imperfect manifestation of an idea of table. I have an idea of table, and so I can recognize that this is the table. But before you had the idea of a table, abstract idea of a table, before you had these ideas which Plato called the forms. So he thought, I can recognize this phone because first of all, this smartphone, because first of all I have an idea of what the smartphone is. And then I can see this concrete manifestation of an iPhone, which is this concrete manifestation, but maybe sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it's imperfect manifestation, of the idea of an abstract idea of a smartphone which works perfectly and doesn't get stuck, doesn't go out of charge after 5 minutes, and so on. So Plato believed that the material world was an imperfect copy of the world of forms. The material world was less real than the world of forms. He argued that the individual should focus on the world of forms, on the idea, rather than on the material world. Forms were eternal and unchanging, while the constantly changing the material world constantly changed. So, this idealism means, we have this notion, we have this idea, we have this concept which are eternal. So, human beings have had the idea of a table for 2,000, 3,000 years. This always existed. This table, it's, how much? So it can be 20 years maximum. 10, 15 years, let's say. It's even happening. So, the idea of the table is more important than this material expression of the table. So Plato believed the ideas, the forms come before. So, why should society be governed by philosophers? Because the philosophers are those who are able to understand the world of the forms, the ideas. So Plato made this myth of the cave to explain the situation. So human beings lives in a cave, in which they see these shadows. These shadows that is just, the real world that comes and are the shadows. And are just shadows of the real world. It's not the real form. So, it's an allegory of the journey that the philosopher is the one who is able to go to the real world and see the real world and not the shadows. So the philosopher is the person who takes, the effort to develop knowledge. Which you remember that for Socrates, knowledge and virtue is the same thing. So the philosopher takes the effort to get to know the forms, the ideas, and get out of the cave. Okay? So, let's say this is the myth of the cave is people are chained in the cave, and they only see these shadows that are the shadow of the reality. And then you have the philosopher who get to know the thing. So this is why we say the philosopher is those who manage to get to know the forms. So they should be in charge. The society should be ruled by an elite of people who have knowledge, who have technical capabilities of ruling the society. So it supports aristocracy. Aristocracy means Aristos is the best, the government of the best ones.